Hello, hello. Alright, looks like the stream is live. Uh-huh. No one is watching. That's great. Alright. I'm not going to be talking a whole lot because I'm not feeling great, but this is a new tool, a new iteration of a tool I've been working on for a while called Zajal. This was my master's work in grad school, and it's basically been a multi-year exploration into new ways of thinking about creative coding, new semantics in creative coding. And this is where I'm at. So what we have is my text editor on the left. This is Sublime Text. I can write code as I please. The language is a ClojureScript. And what you see on the right is Zajal itself. Right now it's blank because there's no code running. But the window on the right, the Zajal window, is watching this file that I'm editing on the left. So one way that I have of affecting that is saving the file. So if I hit Command S, this file gets saved. And you see that I get a little alert that pops up over here. Another way that I have of affecting the sketch is by evaluating code directly. So if I type +1, 2 and hit a different key shortcut, which is Control L, you'll see that that shows up in the bottom window, and that just gets evaluated immediately. So that's a way to try out like little bits of code without sort of updating the whole file. And these are the two modes of live coding that come from the Clojure and Arcadia work that I've been doing. So what I'm experimenting with here is functional programming and how it relates to creative coding. And the basic idea is in Zajal you can take some kind of start data. In this case, it's just an empty hash map. And then whenever the inputs change, so a simplification of that is every frame, but really generally whenever the inputs change, a function gets run that takes the old state and the input of that frame and produces a new state, and that gets passed to a draw function. So that's a little wordy, but let me show you what I mean by that. So let's say that every frame, I'm just going to pass along the input. And the way we're going to draw the input is just that. So I'm going to save the file. Save the file. Maybe angry. Oh. So let's turn it to a string. There we go. So you'll see now we're basically dumping out the input state. It's maybe a little hard to see, but this is part of the experiment, is how to make this more visible. The system is designed to be relatively straightforward, where every frame, this function is consuming whatever the state was before and the input of that frame, and that gets passed on to this draw function. And the draw function basically decides what to draw. In this case, it's an HTML H1 element with whatever the state it got passed. So if we just do that instead, that should freeze. This is also pretty buggy. So that may be, let's actually put them into a hash map. See what that looks like. Whoa, there we go. I was not expecting that. Ooh. Oh, right. Because at the end of this function, that becomes the old state. So the basic idea is you have like you have like a start, and that goes into your step function, plus the input of that frame, and that gives you a state, and that goes into your draw function, which gives you an image for frame 1. Meanwhile, that state gets fed into step again, and it goes into draw, and that produces an image frame 2. And so on and so forth. So it's like this pipeline of data. If that's not perfectly clear, that's also okay. This is the kind of thing that a nice document and images would make it clearer. So the tech is it's just HTML, and right now it's bottoming out in SVG. Down the line will probably be some kind of 3JS. I'm working on a 3JS sort of high performance React style diffing graphic system. That's about all the context that I want to lend, and I'm just going to be sort of hacking quietly from here on out, try to make something fun. So if you have questions, I think the chat will work. You should be able to like ask questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them. There's a bug. There's like 2 prests. X and Y works though. Little buddy. Let's make you fill the thing. Now let's circle. Cool. I think the style does have to be, this is kind of annoying. So there's no graphics library. I'm not sure if I said that earlier, but so it's all raw reagent, and a lot of it will bottom out in this somewhat clumsy like JS syntax where we have to create actual JavaScript objects. That can it'll all be smoothed out down the line. So right now there's no real state. We're just sort of dealing with input. Should be a line there. Nice thing about seeing HTML like this is that you can actually inspect and see that there is actually a line there. It's just not being drawn, so you probably need a style as well. I'm just going to start creating style function. Is that less gross than hash ds? I don't know. It's more characters. Yeah, fuck it. I'm not gonna do that. So you need a style, I guess, to make you work. Right, there we go. That's a little line. And so here the contents of style and all of that is, that's just the SVG spec. These are the parts of it that I sort of remember. Let's just make this a little... Clean this up just a bit. There we go. That should be okay. Yeah. Now I just have the mouse X and the mouse Y sort of broken out. I could do that in the function signature probably. Forget how to do a deep. Yeah, it's a little clumsier. You could do a sort of something like that if you really wanted to. But I forget and I will fuck it up. So the light binding works well enough. There's a little guy. So the drawing semantics of SVG are, whatever shows up later in the document is on top. There's no way to do Z depth, I don't think. So if I just put this guy here, we now have the line underneath. Which is a little annoying, but that goes away in like WebGL. That's just how they built SVG. Let's try and make a bunch of circles of decreasing size going towards the origin. There's also no good way to sort of, I guess you could cheat. I was gonna say there's no good way to ask for the size of the window, but it's like something like that in JavaScript that I forget. I don't know. So just ask for all the keys on the window object. This is the nice thing too about live coding, is that you can just sort of not know what you're doing, which is my default state, and just ask the system questions. So do you have anything akin to width, little guy? Outer width. Boom, boom. Oh, cool. Yeah. So this is the kind of thing that would actually eventually come in through input, because it's input here is anything that is outside of this functional pipeline. This is the realities of the outside world, but it doesn't do that quite yet. So let's call this window width. We'll just compute it every time. Let's try that. Boom, save. Oh, well, yeah, we shouldn't really see a difference. But now let's actually try and go from the window width over 2. So this should be, yeah, there we go. That's not bad. That should even be like responsive or whatever. Ooh, look at that. All right, so now we have a nice little origin thing going on. Let's draw a bunch of circles along that line. Don't really know why. It just seems like a thing to do. So to do that, we're going to need to compute some points along the way. And those are going to be new x's and new y's. And some radii of decreasing size. So we need a lerp function. Again, really no standard library at all. Everything is cook it up on the spot. A, so alert from A to B. People are asking if input is merged into state. It can be if you want to. Basically, your step function or your update function. It's not called update because of there's a closure core function called update. It gets handed the state of the last frame and the input of this frame. So these could even be named like last state and input. And if you want to merge them, you can if you want. But what I'm doing right now is I'm just returning the input, and the input is our whole state. We're not really, we're not doing anything else beyond just reacting to the user's input directly. There could potentially even be a mode where if you're sort of opting in to just reacting to input and not maintaining state, that you just write one draw function. But right now, the full system expects the three parts: the initial state, the state updater, and the drawing function. So lerp A, B to T. I'm going to try not to fuck this up. And it should be, so if T is 0, it's A. Right. I think it's that. Something like that. So from 20 to 30, half the way is 25, that's correct. None of the way is 20, and all of the way is 1. Oh, look at that. All right, so we have a lerp. Let's try and just do one extra circle manually. So now this new circle is going to be Cx is going to be the lerp from the mouse X to, this is going to get a little chunky, so I'm going to go ahead and name these. Center X. Center Y is the outer height. Okay. So lerp from X to center X. 0.5 was a nice, easy number. And then your Y is going to be the lerp from the Y to the and let's make you half as big. Oh, look at that. Two little things. The approach that I like about doing this more, I guess this isn't just limited to functional programming. It just feels easier with really terse functions and a live programming environment. I can start to identify like areas like this where things are getting a little verbose. And if positional arguments make sense, I could just do that. I tend to like named arguments. Some people disagree with that. But now we have a little circle function, and these can actually be replaced like that. And that's just a little more terse. I guess for situations where it's obvious, maybe also my indenter is not doing what I wanted to do. I was sort of forced to upgrade to Sublime Text 3, and that should still work. And it does. Oh, and it fucked up my indentation. Fine. Fuck you. I will. Right, so you can sort of move back and forth and tidy things up as they get a little crowded, and then spin them out as they as you have nicer versions. Also, before I automate anything, I like to do this. I like to. Oh no. What is? I don't even need to do that math. So between 50 and 0, we're going 75% of the way. Oh. Yeah, that'll also do it. There we go. Got some little balls. It's like a little candy. So one thing that I'm a little anxious about in this setup, and that's why I have like prototypes going forward of this, is performance. I think this should be okay. Yeah, this is fine. You can't really get too crazy with this setup. SVG isn't crazy fast. React is also not really that. It's not that it's not fast. It just makes decisions that make more sense for UI than they do for creative coding. If that makes sense. So I have a differ that I like a little bit more. It seems to perform a little bit better. So here's a little thing, and that's pretty cool. If we want to make a bunch, we have to generate a bunch of values between 0 and 1. So really the prototypical, this is the call that they're all going to sort of end up looking like. And we just need to generate, the values that we care about. So for like 20 values, and we divide them each one by 20, we get all these values between 0 and 1. And we should be able to, might have to put them in a group. Let's see. Actually, I'm just going to do that. I keep hitting Command I too, which is a key binding an old key binding that I'm used to. So, and now instead of the hard-coded values, boom, boom, divide that. A little gross, we're going to hard-code 20 in for now, but let's see if that works. There we go. And there's a little thing. Not half bad. Not quite as smooth as one might like, but like I said, performance is not really a goal of this prototype. It's understood to not be crazy fast. So let's say we like that. Let's say this is just a construct that we want to hang on to, and we're going to call this it's like a lumpy line. And it's definitely going to have a number of sort of dots. And let's start this start and then a number of dots. And it's going to return this whole thing that I just pulled out. Again, I think that's pretty cool is I love being able to sort of build things up literally, so like sort of in the field, so to speak, quote unquote, and then just pull them into functions and just move back and forth like that. It's quite a nice workflow. I'm getting something in the chat. Provided that the implementation of circle stays the same, similar arguments can be made and sort of serialized. Yeah, so this is the, I think, Boris, you mean using circle in a vector versus a list, sort of the square brackets versus the round brackets. That's a reagent thing that I think is pretty cool. They basically become funcs, and then every frame it'll compare the implementation of circle and its arguments, and if neither has changed, then it doesn't re-render that branch. Yeah, which is really cool. I have a prototype of that in my differ that does it for 3JS. So lumpy line. So here end is going to be boom, boom, boom. It's the number of lumps we're going to make. And now we can assume that start and end have an X and Y key. No, this gets a little weird because I've actually run into this. I don't know if there's a good closure way to do it, but I actually need to rename the keys. I'm sure there's some trick in the binding form where I can rename the keys, because they're both going to have keys of the same name, but these should be like start X and start Y, and these are end X and end Y. because I want to be able to pass into hash maps. So I may just destructure them in place. Let's just do that without getting too cute. So here, oops. Oh, yeah, that's fine. That's not. Yeah, that's. Doesn't even need destructuring. You're just only ever calling them once. Save this. Should be fine. And now we should be able to replace this whole thing with Lumpy Line, X, X, Y, Y. So this is the circle, the mouse X and the mouse Y. And then X, center X, center Y, center X, and Y, center Y. I'm not used to these bindings. Save that. Oh, and we didn't give it an N. This is 5, 7. Oh, it's not uniform. That's funny. I wonder if that's a floating point thing. 10, 20. This will probably suck. Look at that frame drop. What was this? I don't really need these circles anymore, I don't think. Yeah, they're extraneous. Cool. So we have our lumpy line. And the nice thing about abstracting, of course, is that you can start to fuck it up. So what if now this one is, I don't know, these two things. So we're only drawing that line. That line didn't get folded into the function. That line is just up here. So we could move it in. Let's just do that. And then right. So then this should be start. And this should be end. Yep, two lines. I don't want to mirror, so maybe that's what I want. And now it's just is that what I want? That's kind of what I wanted. I would have expected them to the x's to meet at the center. Oh, because the whole scene is still technically centered on the origin. Right. Yeah. There's a solution to this, which I will implement, and then let's see if that just magically fixes. So the problem is that the origin, even though we're, redrawing things from the center, the origin is still the top left corner, which is traditional in computer graphics, I guess. But it sort of robs you of a lot of interesting symmetries. So let's actually, instead of drawing everything from center X, let's do all of this stuff relative to the origin. And now let's actually transform the whole scene This is another thing that makes this stuff fairly slow, is there's quite a bit of string operations, which you don't see in 3.js. No, it's translate. I think this works. It may not be a thing. Do-do. Yeah, it's got to translate. Do you need units? Nope, that's not gonna work. It's not that, is it? No. May have to look this one up. It's annoying. I should have it in a older project. That's a mess. Oh no, that should be fine. It is transform translate. Maybe it's just that I need to actually put everything in a group. Let's go back to that. Transform, translate, and then we don't even need. Oh, maybe you need a space actually. Is that what it was? Nah, I'll put you all in a group. That's probably what you want. Boom, boom. See the subtlety of slinging the brackets over. Save. Transform. Oh, weird. What? I would have expected that to do it. No, there it is. Oh well. Let me just look it up on. It's probably something innocuous. Let's just try giving it one number. And there's no units. There seems to be no units. Oh, okay. That works. And then space. Oh, that was kind of lame. Whatever. So this is the kind of stuff that would be cleaned up by a nice little graphics library for this. You can see that the mouse is no longer correlated to the positions. That's because the mouse input is coming in pixel coordinates, and the what we're drawing to is a translated coordinate space. So I'm not gonna do a whole lot to correct that right now, but that's just what that is. So we've got our lumpy lines, and we've got a little bit of mouse interaction. I want to try and record and hold on to state, just to sort of get a feel for that or demonstrate what that might look like. So, it's a good way to do that. We could cycle through colors of these little lumps so that they're not all solid black. Be something like lumpy line here, circle. So this is where it gets a little annoying. So circle function, if I want the circle function to take a style, now I need to go back and give it another arity. It takes a style, and really, well, it should be that. And the smaller arity really just calls circle with no style. Like that. Sort of expanded that old function. So now we should be able to come down here and pass it a... we could intervene here too. So now I could just say, color blue. Oh, it's not color, is it? It's fill? Yeah, there we go. And that's pretty cool. We can also lerp these. Again, I kind of like hard coding things just to get a sense for what's happening, and then pulling that out into functions. So this works too, right? RGB 120, 40, 10. Some values I made up, which means that we can do. Let's just hard code some R values. Let's say start R is going to be 0, and end R is going to be 200. Sure. No. Key bindings not used to. Okay, so and the color is this RGB thing where so you could actually, this is kind of how I envision some of this stuff working. GB. And then you just get this sort of, whatever the host needs. So what is it? Commas, fine, here's a comma. RG, B, and close paren. So the color here is just RGB, and you're going to go from start, and we're going to lerp from start R and R. We use N because N is what's being. Oh no, I guess we need to put that in here. Yeah. Start R, end R, and here right, divide N by 2. Or sorry, divide whatever number you're on by N. So let's actually wrap that whole thing. Let's call it T. That's something that interpolation values will get called often. I don't know. It's the same thing. Like when I notice that, I'm kind of saying this a bunch. Let's just break it out into a variable or not a variable, right? But a let binding or a function. Usually not before that though. I don't like to overgeneralize or overplan these things. So we got our lerp from start R to the end of R. We're going to use T. And let's just use fixed values for now. Save that. Did you like that? Upset you? Yeah, it'll throw warnings because it wants elements to be uniquely keyed. It doesn't look like anything is broken though. Error reporting is also something that you just need to sort of explicitly build. Let's look. I'm looking at the fill values. No, those all look. They look like they're not changing. So I'm just gonna test out this RGB function. It is a thing. Oh, it's not a thing. Okay, now it's a thing. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's what we expect it to do. And if we give it some actual values, I mean, this shouldn't be different. Start. If it's like from 10 to 100. yeah, that should just do it. Make values too. So we get a bunch of circles, and then the fill. Let's do sanity check. The fill is just going to be red. Oh, it's not listening to us at all, it seems. So it seems to be like some old version. We're getting errors. Let's see. Oh, end of file. There's some unbalanced parenthesis. Wait. Oh no. See, this is what a good editor should prevent from happening. There we go. And that will be all red. Yep. Yeah. So my Sublime, like I said, something happened to my Sublime text. It sort of hiccuped and reset all my shit, which is pretty frustrating. But that's what that was. There we go. And then the gradient. That's kind of what I was hoping for. Ooh. This is gradient on the one axis. It's just the red that's sort of increasing. Let's just do an inverse slurp, so 1 minus t now. It's a little black towards the end. What if we bump up the, what's controlling how many of these we get? Get 20 of them. Oh, that is weird. Like a weird little, I wonder if that's a floating point thing. Or just SVG sort of, the fact that these all get turned into strings just causing it to trip up. So if I don't do that, if this is actually a constant, oh, just look at that weird ring. That's totally unexpected. We could ask it where it thinks is up. Should be this one. And the fill is, oh, it's getting no style for some reason. How could it be that one of them is just not getting a style? That's why it's showing up totally black. Those are the only places where we call a circle. Unless the CLJ to JS is causing it to throw an error. Someone just described this as a Peacock Feather Simulator 2016. And I'm glad that I got to get that simulator in before the end of the year. That is a really peculiar oddity. So we can actually run this experiment. Not to sing the praises of functional programming too much. But you can sort of, I mean, the question here is like, okay, what is this function doing? And you can just simulate it. So actually, I don't even need to pull that stuff out. So Lumpy Line is just a function, right? I get the sort of code, the JavaScript code that it compiles to internally. If I give it fake values, I'm going to say, okay, you're going to start, no, you give start is going to be like x, 0, y, 0, and then like the next one, your end is going to be x, 100, and y, 130. I'm actually going to give it some numbers, and we're going to ask for 10, right? I could just run this independently of actually running it on the canvas, and just sort of look at what it dumps out. It's a little bit of a mess, but I can do. This is what they call enclosure scripts, I believe. Maybe not. Well, there's normally a nice p printer enclosure, and don't actually know how to get it in ClojureScript. This is all the bootstrapped ClojureScript too, so the way things get required is a little broken. Does that do it? No. It's fine. Oh, there's no use, is there? Let's... Does that work? No. Ah, forget it. That's fine. We can pick this apart by hand. So the first thing is this G element, and right, because everything gets wrapped up in G. The second thing should be the line, which we don't really care about. And there isn't a third enclosure, which is funny. Oh, two. Really. So then we get all these circles, which I guess is the last thing, right? Because it is the sequence of circles. And they seem to all, well, let's see actually. So this is the last, and I'm going to ask them all. So I'm going to pull the second thing out of all of them. So this is, I've pulled out all their styles effectively. Or all their attributes. Now I'm going to pull out all their styles. And we see that it is, we got R, so the blue, the G and the B are constant as we'd expect, and the R seems to be, well, let's just look at that too. That should do it. So these are all the fills. It's a little harder to go in more detail because they're strings, so you can't like actually ask this thing what its R component is, because it's just a string that we're handing off to SVG, which is why this representation is, you know, not really my favorite, but it's what SVG is doing. So we got 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 140, 160, 180. Yeah, no, that all looks fine, unless, yeah, but they're both producing this extraneous little circle. Or do we not see it when it's, oh, we don't see it when it's at 10. Okay, so we see it when it's at 20. So let's go back to the experiment. Let's actually run this with 20 and see what that gives us. Okay, I wonder, so this one jumps out as a possible, you know, SVG just maybe freaking out about that, though it shouldn't. And that's a floating point. That's some floating point shenanigans. You see that should be, you know, 110, but it's 110.0001. What if we just made them all ints? I don't know. This works, I believe. Oh, yep. This floating point shenanigans all along. It just went away. So functional programming and live coding are, just for debugging, are, I don't know, kind of non-negotiable for me at this point. Because when I'm doing creative work, just the ability to ask questions and keep moving forward is what keeps it interesting and keeps it expressive. It was like 30. Bring them closer. Also make it so that the effects are not felt as much, or the effects of the mouse, so I can just dampen them here. You know, just kind of making it up. Is that like, yeah, well, that's not bad. Look at that. Let's see if we can make the colors position dependent, just for fun. So maybe the green and the blue, let's also make these int, so it doesn't get upset. Maybe we'll map those. Kind of want to like take, let's actually just do one at a time. So you're gonna stay at 50 or whatever. So we're gonna lerp from the starting X to the, or, no, I actually kind of want, yeah, I want the current x. So the x is there, and then the y is there. Again, just making the observation that looks like I'm going to end up using these twice. So I'm just going to break them out into their own things. So circle xy, and then the radius here. I'm just going to go back on what I just said and just give this guy his own name. Just to keep things regular. Doop. Doop. Okay. We can do the same with the colors too, if we feel that they're getting a little long in the tooth. But let's lerp from the x that we arrived at to the y in t. And this will freak out because it's going to be greater than 255, but I just want to sort of see that. Oh no, I totally freaked out. Spew of errors. Ooh, means I didn't do my React stuff correctly. Let's see if hitting it with a stick, does that fix it? Maybe not. Let's back out of some of that stuff. Let's go back. So this is where the engineering, getting the stuff right is important. Because now I'm thinking about exactly the kind of stuff that I don't want to be thinking about. All right, so maybe took too many steps at once and broke things unreasonably. But yeah, clear error messages, just better sort of semantics to deal with that would take care of situations like that. I had to restart the system. It's not the end of the world, but it's a little lame. So it's going to be x, y, and r. X, y, and r is kind of its own thing. Another way to avoid that is to just take smaller steps. So, right, so that's fine. Confirm that that's okay. We'll look between x and y and t and just see what that's like. Get a little bit of kind of int y and x and t. Oh, no, that doesn't make sense. Lerp. Nope. Boom. It seems to just be affecting the one buddy. I can make the mouse line up a little more, where let's say if instead of taking those absolute positions, we subtracted from the center of the window, minus center, borrow that character. There we go, that's a little better. That's a little extreme of dampening. Let's make it 50%. Oh no, they're both doing it. It's colors. It's great. And if we want to make this, just to sort of cap off the I studied creative coding at Parsons stream, throw in some trig. So it should be JS math on, yeah. Okay. So that just cleans that up a little. So, that's all I really want. There's your cosine, there's your sine. So what if we passed into, let's actually add to x the sine of t. Oh, that's not really what I expected. Let's increase the frequency. Whoa, there we go. Now we're doing some creative coding. That's a thing. I don't really know what I was expecting, but that's not quite it, but I'm into it. So you're gonna go down there. So we're just adding to the x component now, and we're getting that squiggly snaky pattern. And if we increase the resolution, which frame rate's not gonna like, we get that. And I'm kind of not into that red line anymore, so I'm gonna go ahead and make it go away. No. Little liney circly buds. The same with radius, so sine of t instead of t itself. I just made those a little bigger. Oh, right, because we're still going between 0 and 50. We could do this. It'll probably be a little lame, but let's see what that's like. Oh, whoa. No, not lame at all. Invert it. Oh. Ah, you can't have. I guess it has to be 100. There we go. Amazing what you could do with circles. Oh, we didn't even end up using start. Oh, we did. That's R as in red, not R as in radius. My bad. Oh, this is getting to a point that I'm somewhat pleased with. It'll be nice to send like a pulse wave through the whole thing and just make it sort of ripple and animate. And to do that, we'll need to send it time. So let's give it time as a last parameter, t. And let me remember. So time is an input, right? You get sort of let know, you're told. This should be fine. The extra parameter won't break in JavaScript. A quick way to just check what we're dealing with is, this will sort of break things, but. Right, so it's just called elapsed. Just forgot what I called it. I think it's spelled right. I'm really bad. Just like double check my spelling and everything. So that's the number of milliseconds elapsed. Let's move the thing back. And that's what we're going to pass to our lump buds. Not the string version. I'm just going to pull that number out. This is good. Yeah, lumpy line from the mouse position to the origin. Draw 60 of them. And now we're going to pass in this t parameter. Oh, we shouldn't call it t, I guess. It is time. Because we're already using t in here, right? So time, we're going to make that fuck with the radius. So let's see what that's like. that seems to have broken things. Let Tim. I might have to restart. I think it's at a place where if it gets a particular kind of error, it will just go down forever. Oh, there we go. Wow, it's crazy slow. Like I said, performance is not really something this thing's going to be able to do. So we're going to add... So maybe time is too big in this case. I kind of want to pulse with the music. So maybe we just add to the base radius, which is already pretty nice. Sine of Tim times, yeah, I like this actually. Let's do that. There we go. Pulsing buddies. And then let's offset them. So you are gonna be, right, there we go. Maybe not enough of an offset. Is that? Oh, right. N is the same for all of them, but the percent in this case is the anonymous, is the variable. There we go. Cool. So then we actually want less of an offset. I'm going to slow down time by a lot. There we go. So I didn't really use any state. This is a fun little hack together. SVG sketch. Maybe the most complete thing I've made in this. Screenshot. I think that's about as far as I want to go. I do want to do maybe one thing with state. Maybe even just something lame to just to demonstrate oh yeah, let's do that. Let's do like a debug mode. So you can like click and then we draw it with much fewer circles, and you click again and then you get the full thing. Let's just do that. So the way that looks, again, we got to go up to the step function, and the functions aren't magically named. It's just they're associated with the sketch in this line down here. So it's looking to the current value of the step function to update the state every frame. So we go back up to step. Right now it's just giving us input, but I'm just going to associate onto the input. No, I'm going to associate onto the last state, actually. I'm going to associate debug to be true. Oops. If the mouse is pressed, then make it true. Oh, okay, let's do this and let's see how it breaks, if it breaks, and then we'll talk about it. Because I don't think this is going to do what I want it to do. And I don't think my indenter is doing what I want it to do. All right, so if the mouse is pressed, give us true, otherwise give us false. False. And just to test that, so kind of say we're getting oh, it didn't. Oh, why didn't you like that? It's getting a little jammed. guess we should, what if the start state was actually nil? And if there's no last state, then we just start off input, otherwise it's last state. Okay. Kick the system awake again. See if it's complaining. Yeah, and we're getting these fun, completely useless error messages. I'll try again. Ah, right, there's this thing called mouse. Ah, so lame. Oh, and when we do it that way, the interesting. So now the positions aren't changing because we're sort of freezing the input as the last state. So that's maybe not the best way to do it. Let's actually just build up real state. So we've been using the keys mouse and time. So mouse just becomes the mouse of the input, and time just becomes the time of the input. That's fine. And here the initial state will be that. So now we should always be getting fresh values. And now that should be a thing, okay? And, oh, oops. Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah, you could do a variadic. Yeah. Now we're going to say, okay, debug. If the mouse is pressed, then true, otherwise false. Let's try that. There we go. So that's close. You'll see that the pressed and debug are sort of coupled. It's not really a toggle. What I want is like when I click, sort of flip it. So let's build that up. There's a little bit of nuance to actually getting that done. Let's build that up. Man, this indenter does not into it. Look at that. Like that's what it wants to do. We'll just live with it for now, I guess. So if it's pressed, we're going to say maybe at last state, pull debug out of the last state, right, and it's just the inverse of that. Otherwise, it's false. Let's see what that looks like. You get this problem, right? When you're like, as I click and hold, every frame is sort of like oscillating between true and false. One way to deal with this is, down the line, I kind of want to be able to pass you in input and the last input. So you can just be like, okay, if only on the first frame of you pressing, do you consider do you toggle the debug, right? Because that way you can diff the inputs across frames. But in the absence of that, you should be able to just say, so if you've pressed and I'm going to say, I have like another key that's like, right, which is normally going to be nil. Let's just do this. Really? You're not going to indent that? All right, you want me to do this. There we go. So, I'm going to figure out, is this the first frame that the user clicked? So it is if the just pressed, and how are we going to say this? could record the timestamp, right? We could say last press time is if pressed. Yeah, let's do that first. Just trying to figure this out as I go along. If you're pressing, then it's the elapsed time. Otherwise, it's the last press time from the last state. So let's actually not worry about debug for now. Let's do that. So your last press time is nil. And now it's recording the timestamp of when I last pressed. Pretty cool. So now we can say that you just pressed if the keyboard is pressed and your last press time is less than the elapsed time. Let's see if that works. We'll clean that up if this actually works. So I just gave you a just pressed. Should be. I wonder why it's not. I'm not seeing this new key show up. I'm going to try and extract it explicitly. Say just pressed. Oh, we also might have some freakouts. Oh, we do. Too few arguments to if. Like I said, systems like this I think are made in, yep. So if you're pressed and, right, we didn't even say what to do. So if both of these are true, then what? Oh, it's not an if, it's just an and. Ah, there we go. Ooh. Now just press remains. Is that less than or equal to? Last state, last press time. It's less than. It should be. 47,000 is less than. But then last press time should get updated and then next. Well, can't quite wrap my head around it, and I want to wrap up. So this is where and how you would sort of compute and store state. If you were sort of a little more lucid than I am right now, you'd solve this. But really, this would be just built into the library. Like I said, there's no support library here beyond just the presence of reagent and the reloading mechanisms. It's all being built just sort of from scratch as I go. So I'm just gonna sort of bind debug to and just sort of And then that should be trickling down. No? Restart it. Debug is still being set to. Oh, right. So it's what the mouse is pressed, not just pressed in general. There we go. All right, and we'll go down to draw. I'll pull that out. And now we'll say if we're in debug mode, give me 10, otherwise give me 60. And it's 10, a lot snappier, and up to 60. Oop, oop, oop. That's basically it. Questions, I guess, going forward. There's definitely the sort of technical problem of getting this to run at any appreciable speed. I mean, how bad is this? This is probably embarrassingly slow. Yeah, just bring up the fucking... React is also just losing its mind, throwing warnings, which I could quell, but again, it's just that its assumptions don't really line up with what I'm trying to do. Yeah, it's just embarrassingly slow is the correct is the right way to. And this is honestly what's kept me from like putting this out for a little while. I've kind of sat on it until I can get my own 3.js differ up and running, but kind of want to wrap it up, and because the live coding and the socket REPL stuff is, I mean, it's pretty solid, and the or at least it's already in the form that the final thing is supposed to take. And the basic structure of a state updating function, and a functional drawing function. Notice that this isn't actually like drawing anything to the screen, it's just producing data that then gets merged in and rendered as SVG. That's all kind of established. I don't really see myself deviating from that, so there'll be some variation of this stuff. And yeah, open questions are, how do you manage libraries, sort of set up so that every sketch you make is a potential library, because there's no there's no notion. It's all just functions that return data, so you can take bits and pieces of other people's sketches and use them if you want. That's an open question. How do you share this stuff online is another question. I guess you just ship the Clojure compiler, which I'm okay with. It's kind of a hefty download, but that's fine. And then further down the line, I kind of see a C# mono-based Clojure environment like this on top of the magic compiler stuff that I've been working on, because that'll give you really good sort of multi-window, multi-threaded support for being able to do this kind of creative coding. Those are the prevailing thoughts. So if this was interesting, thanks for watching. I'm going to disconnect.